Welcome to the Bearing Life Podcast, a place for authentic conversations and real life stories. Together, we can find meaning in any season. I'm Dr. Julie Shannon. Thanks so much for joining me.
Close your eyes and count to 10. Take this moment to breathe
Welcome to the Bearing Life Podcast. Today, I have Kat Nasseri on with me. We are talking about trauma and its effect on our bodies. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And Kat was on with me before. If you didn't listen to the pelvic floor dysfunction episode, it was episode 21. I encourage you to go listen to that. That was so enlightening to me, whether you're man, woman, child, it applies. So it's a great episode. Kat is a PT, DPT, WCS, board certified in public health, and she's based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She's been a physical therapist for 5 years. In the last 3, she has specialized in pelvic health. And like I said, she treats women, men, children with a variety of pelvic floor dysfunctions. So, Kat, welcome. We said before we were going to connect again and talk about this other important topic. Mm-hmm. And so here we are. So I am so glad to have you with me.
Thank you so much. I am so glad to be back. And I am super excited to talk about this topic because, yes, it's important to me as a pelvic floor therapist, and it's important to us throughout our whole body. And it's going to matter to so many people. So I'm really excited.
Well, thank you. And we just had a little bit of a conversation before we started, and something came to my mind that I'd totally forgotten about, because I think about trauma and stress and how we carry it in our bodies. And really that comes from a class I took in grad school, a counseling class. I learned the drastic effects that when you have trauma, emotional or mental trauma, even not even physical. Mm-hmm. I mean, physical is bad too, but the emotional, mental trauma as a young child, how it can affect you way into adulthood. Mm-hmm. And that was surprising to me. But anyway, when we were talking a minute ago, I thought about when I was a kid and this weird, extraordinary time frame of some stress that really had nothing to do with me personally, but it was extended family stuff. Mm-hmm. And how much I took that stress on and things that went on in my body when I was a kid. And then I can think of all these different seasons in life where we don't realize maybe what it's doing to our bodies and then how traumatic it can be. So I wanted to walk through that because I think when I think about it, I always think of it as, oh, well, mine's not valid. You used this word a little while ago. Whatever mine is, it isn't valid because, it wasn't, I didn't escape death, or I didn't have someone trying to kill me, or, I sometimes feel like trauma means a really big event.
Yes.
So help us understand that. Give us a definition or understanding of trauma.
Absolutely. So I want to go ahead and say I am not a mental health therapist, but I have had a lot of training in, trauma-sensitive care as a physical therapist, and then have worked with a lot of amazing therapists, mental health therapists throughout my life, and I've done a lot of research. So see them for more information, but I'm going to share what I know. And I don't want to diminish that, but I do want to say also I'm not a mental health therapist. But so the trauma is kind of a big word. It has a lot of meaning and emotion tied to it. And I think one of the best things that we can kind of say is dividing it out into big T trauma and little t trauma. So that's something that therapists will use a lot. So a big T trauma would be things like assault, war, right? A horrific car accident, things that cause you physical bodily injury, or even emotional injury that comes from a physical injury, things like that. Those will be included in our big T traumas. Okay. Then we have little t traumas, things like being in a really uncomfortable situation where you don't feel safe, but nothing necessarily happens, right? You feel like maybe you're getting off the train and you think somebody's following you and you're trying to hurry home because you're afraid of something happening. Like that's a little T trauma, right? Or things like being in a really bad argument with somebody around you, with a loved one, with a partner. Those things can all be considered into little T trauma. So I think that people often, and particularly us as women, I can speak for us, we often say, well, it's not like I got punched in the face, so that wasn't really traumatic. My friend just screamed at me, right? Like that is not trauma. But it's like that's still traumatic and that still matters and that still had an impact on you emotionally and mentally. And then that then can carry forward physically as well. So I think that that's really important to identify.
Okay, hold on. That, the way you just said that, so true. I could hear myself. Well, it was just, we, for whatever reason, especially I think as women, tend to minimize. That's a good word to be on alert for in your own brain, even if it's just the self-talk that's quiet. When we say, well, that's not that important because it was just ... Thank you for using that word.
Yes. It's important to recognize that these things still matter and don't try to shove it away and pretend that it didn't impact you just because something terrible didn't happen. It's not exclusive, right? And I think that's why I love whenever like I'm in a session with a patient and we're talking about things and they say, well, it's not that bad, but this happened, it wasn't anything terrible, but, and I'm like, well, let's use the word trauma, but let me help you kind of categorize that because I think it makes our brain kind of understand like, okay, yes, that can still be called trauma. I don't have to call it a big T trauma. I can just call it one of my little T traumas. And that still means we have trauma in our life. That means honestly, every human on earth has some form of trauma in their life history. How many of us have a big T trauma or just a bunch of little T traumas? They still exist and we've all experienced them. So
I like that framework that you just introduced because I think too, we also live in a society where it seems like everybody just is so reactive, like not in a good way. Just everybody's waiting to be offended or waiting to jump back or waiting to leap back. And that's its own trauma anyway. But I like the framework of, hey, your friend screamed at you. No, it wasn't a big T trauma, but it still has an effect. So you don't have to over the top react to it.
Right.
But there's a way to process it within yourself to help your brain understand. Because I think subconsciously there's so much that goes on in our brains. If we I don't think we can ignore it because we ignore it and shove it away, right? Then it just kind of build up.
That's where it then stores, right? And that's that then storage of trauma because we aren't allowing ourselves to process it. And then we just hold on to it and can't figure out where to go with it. And
so that's a good thing. So first we need to understand there are different levels or layers or categories, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think people should feel, yes, absolutely. And feel safe in identifying something as a trauma, even if it wasn't a big T.
Okay. So, but then keep that perspective of this isn't a big T, it's a little T. And then process it as such and then react accordingly. Or I sometimes, for me, I feel like, how often do I hold on to a little T? I have a friend I call Little T, and she'll probably listen to this. So that's why I'm hesitating. It's like her husband is Big T and she's Little T. So I got to get that out of my head. But sometimes I know that I need to just let it go, Again, I just so love that song, from Frozen.
Yes.
And I sing it often to myself, let it go.
Yes.
But I also think, don't you think it's appropriate that, okay, there's a big T that we'll talk about dealing with, and there's little T's that maybe daily, but they're nothing to overreact to, that we need to learn how to manage those in our brains and wrap our minds around it. And then there are those little T's that we just need to be Teflon.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And let them go.
Right. And I think those things are probably falling underneath the little T trauma category. It was like, that is a frustration. That was a disagreement. That was something that was maybe not necessarily traumatic. It was problematic, but maybe not traumatic. And
good words. And that frustration, like, so take a minute, take a beat, go, okay, am I frustrated? Is this just problematic, or is this really a little T traumatic for me?
Right. Because then I think we can really keep and honor the word trauma and allow that to stay as something that we do need to continue to work through and process and identify, because it is important, but making sure that you're not under or overreacting, which can actually be a trauma symptom. So, there's that as well. But just really making yourself process through, like, what am I feeling about that situation that just happened?
I really like that clarification, because it kind of goes in with, I did an episode with a psychotherapist on anxiety. And I think that's just such a good, especially in our world today. I think let's just take a few extra seconds and honor. I love that. Honor the word trauma, because there are serious traumas in life. And if we use the word trauma all the time, it loses its meaning and its value and its impact. And then people will undervalue. And you're right. I really like that. So good step to just evaluate what is it. And thanks for helping us understand.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I want to talk about what happens to our bodies with trauma, because when I was a kid, and this, I'm going to call it problematic. It wasn't trauma for me, but because I didn't have the brain development or the understanding, I wasn't mature enough to understand it. It's like I took it in, and I developed like gastrointestinal issues as a young kid that I should never have had, but it was my own internalizing of it. And then I know through adulthood, when we get, I would call job stress, little T stress, really, unless it's a job loss or you get fired, or, I mean, I know that can be a big T trauma. But, having those body reactions to that kind of stress. And then I know I've had some chronic stress, probably would label it. Is there a medium T trauma?
we can make one.
Let's call it medium T.
Yeah.
A baby capital T. How's that?
Perfect.
That over time and in a pattern, I know that that's worked itself out in a very different way in my body.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to see all the different ways stress and trauma can affect you. So why don't you walk us through some of that, like what, and talking about little T or frustration, and then talking about big T trauma and what that can do.
Yeah. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is coming from the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It is by a physician. His name is Bessel van der Kolk, and we'll put a link to that maybe in the show notes.
Yes, we will. That's great.
And as always, shop your local independent bookstores.
Amen. Yes.
But he talks a lot about childhood trauma. And so I want to kind of start there, kind of where you had started with talking about what happened in your life. So again, identifying like, yes, there are childhood traumas, like being assaulted, having terrible things happen, your house catch on fire and losing all of your belongings as a kid, right? Big T trauma things.
Yes.
Other traumas in childhood, like neglect, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to mean your parents left you alone in your house for 4 days. It can mean that you were feeling sad or angry or lonely, and your grown-ups, that's what I like to call it, because I don't want to say parents only, just the grown-ups around you were unable or unwilling to help you identify that, recognize it, and work with you about it and let you talk about it, right? A lot of kids, like, we'll say neglect of sadness, like that you're supposed to be the happy kid, and so you are not allowed to feel sad. And I think that also happens to a lot of girls, right? I mean, how many times are we as women told you look better when you smile? That's what you're supposed to do. And I think that has some deep rooted things otherwise. But anyway, so when you have that, you're going to internally process, right? Instead, if you have to always have that outward emotion of happiness, but we all feel sadness too, then where does that go, right? And how does our body experience it? And he talks a lot in the book about comparing war veterans. So he's a psychiatrist and worked for the VA.
Okay.
And of course was working with veterans after like Vietnam in particular with their PTSD, and then started recognizing, working with other people, that they experienced and were showing and presenting like war veterans, even though they had childhood little t traumas, right? But these kind of cumulative impacts over time like take their toll. And so we can kind of talk about from there, really, what is our body doing, right? And there's a lot of different things. And really, he talks about it a lot as like a fire alarm system. And that's really your brain. And there's a bunch of different layers and areas of your brain that are responsible for processing what's going on around you. Basically, in people who have histories of trauma and not processing that well, their fire alarm system is more sensitive. And so they're not as well able to process something going on around them as also not a problem, if that makes sense. So for example, a person who has a history of trauma in their life and has not processed that, and their fire alarm system has just become overworked and oversensitive. Now, something as simple as, a loud noise from a car on the street can be enough to send you into that protective fight or flight system, because that part of your brain fires before the logical part of your brain that says, I know I just saw an old car, get into that and try to start it.
Right.
That's likely what that is, right? I'm safe, I'm at my house, but I saw that happen. So I knew maybe there's a chance that was going to happen. Maybe I've seen that guy get in that car before and I know it backfires every time. But when your fire alarm system is overactive like that, your amygdala is really part of this system, and the limbic system anyway, they fire so much faster. Like, even though it's only milliseconds before it reaches the front of your brain, which is that logical part that lets you think it, the other part of your brain is getting the signal even faster that's telling your body now, bam, immediately, now we're in fight or flight.
Wow. So I'm guessing as a kid, like if young child has some kind of trauma, like somebody might live in a dangerous neighborhood, or they had a family member that was killed or something that was legitimately big T trauma, or even, as you said, if they just have these overwhelming emotions and they don't have the support to work through those or talk about them or examine them as a kid, and they don't have that brain development yet to be able to discern those things, that either of those children can grow up, if they don't have any assistance in processing it, that it just kind of becomes part of them in a really deep way.
Yep.
That they don't even think about. I mean, it's just a reaction.
All subconscious. Like, that entire thing is subconscious. None of that is under your voluntary control. But it's just the pathways are developed over time because of changes that happen physiologically in your brain.
Wow.
And then throughout your whole body, because obviously your brain is responsible for, of course, a lot of body reactions, responsible for hormonal and other, neurotransmitter releases that then change how your body lives all the time, right? Like stress hormones, they're staying high throughout your body all the time, then your brain is going to be more sensitive, right? Because it's like, I don't even know, my body is telling me I'm stressed out all the time, and I don't know what else to do here. And I don't know how else to respond. And it can't even do that because it's just all happening because of the way the layers are put down and because of the way our nervous system is created. So then when we think about the other cascade of issues from this, so when we think about, constant levels of stress hormone, upregulation of our nervous system, basically it means our brain, our reptilian brain, is a little more sensitive, and really our whole brain is more sensitive, and the pathways are more open to receive signals that now it's not really able to distinguish that's safe, that's not safe, that's fine, I know what that is. Like, it just becomes, it's like turning the water faucet on full force. It's just all of these signals are constantly coming into your brain, and there should be different parts through the brainstem and then through the brain itself that are distinguishing and sending signals in the right direction to tell it where to go, to let your brain process that. But if it can't, because it's just so overwhelmed by signals all the time because of this sensitivity, then your body's going to be just turned on and firing and fight or flight, just staying there. So that's really our sympathetic nervous system. So, sorry, let me clarify really quickly. So we have our autonomic nervous system, which is our kind of outside of our control. And, autonomic, kind of automatic. That's how I like to remember that. And so that happens outside of our brain telling it. We don't have to tell our lungs to inflate and deflate, right? That happens automatically.
Okay.
But so that's under our autonomic nervous system. So it has two separate groups. One is the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And the other one is our parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. For people who are chronically stressed and dealing with trauma, they are staying in this fight or flight system all the time. And then what that means is increased stress hormone levels. And that means we slow down our gut. So when you tell me as a kid you started having GI symptoms, okay, well, what our sympathetic nervous system does is it tells our GI system all the way down to chill. Because if you think about fight or flight, when you're running away from danger, you do not also need to be processing the food you just had. You need to spend more of your energy on sending signals and blood to your big muscle groups in the rest of your body to get you away from that danger. So now your body is at all times sending all of that away from your GI system and to the rest of your body.
Oh, my word. Interesting.
Yeah.
And chaotic.
Chaotic, right? Exactly.
In your body. I mean,
right. Yeah, your poor body is just like so overwhelmed. And so a lot of people who have chronic GI disorders, they've done some research showing some relationship, and not necessarily causal yet, but I think we can pretty confidently say there's at least a role of stress and trauma in autoimmune disorders. So there's also a very strong genetic component and some other things. But if you think about increased stress level and increased stress hormone, that also suppresses your immune system and then can allow that expression of an autoimmune disorder. So we think about people who have a lot of those kinds of...
You just don't even know how many ways you're speaking to me right now, because I do have those things going on as well.
Well, there's a reason. And I think that's kind of my favorite thing about talking about all of these things. I mean, there are reasons that go way, way, way far and deep back, and that can not necessarily tell me exactly why all of the things that are happening in your body happen, but can at least provide us and your other healthcare professionals some rationalization as to what else can go on, right? These people who tell me like, well, I've been trying to deal with this for the last 30 years and nothing's seeming to work and blah, blah, blah. Me not being a mental health therapist and trying to politely and gently and safely guide us into a conversation about trauma and our body is, I wouldn't be doing my job as a physical therapist if I didn't help people find that. It's not my job to treat that because that's not my degree and that's not my specialty. My job is to understand how can that be presenting in your body right now, and how can I help you as my patient or client how can I help you also deal with this mental health part of it? Because I know that's so deep and so real and so connected.
I love that. And connected is such a good word, because you're right. So you can't, and you're acknowledging, for anybody questioning, that's not your specialty to treat. But I love the connection of the whole mind, body, emotion, because I think it's so important to address and to be able to say in a loving, kind fashion, which I know you do, and say, if you've had this for all these years, or if you have this, hey, let's take a look. Let's go back and tell me about this. And then when you hear some of it, then you can, however you do it, say, okay, now let's work on that aspect and whoever you have to cover that area, because it all works together. And I think so often we just don't think about, I think we compartmentalize all of our health things.
Yep.
And I don't always compartmentalize, but it's only because of all the years I went through infertility. And I remember one of the endocrinologists, I went to see a fertility endocrinologist. And I had to fill out, it must have been a 20-page questionnaire. Right. And I'm going, oh my word, you're like the fourth specialist I've been to, and I was really frustrated. It was really hard. And I was like, okay, fine. He's one of the best. All right. And I filled it out, but I started looking at these questions about my physical challenges, or just description when I was a teenager or pre-adolescent, and then adolescence. And then I was like, what? And then he walked me through some of that, which helped me understand a little better some of the autoimmune stuff we had to talk about, and the markers and all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm still very interested in all the science of it and how to deal with. And I try to deal with all of those things. Hopefully I do it in life in a much healthier way than I ever did. But it took that for someone to connect the dots for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then now you come into my life,
right?
And you bring a whole different perspective and add some more dots to connect. And it's like, wow. So for anybody listening, if you have felt stressed out your whole life, you probably have a really good root cause that might be worth exploring and thinking and facing and dealing with.
Right.
Or at least understand there's a reason for the patterns.
Exactly. And that it could be something outside of just a pure medical diagnosis that is operating independently of anything else. Because I think that, almost hopeful on a lot of our parts that it's just this one thing. And if I can have this medicine or this surgery or do this little 6 weeks of this exercise to make that move better, then that's it. And it's taken care of. And I don't have to worry about anything else. And I understand the optimism about that. And I understand the hope and the desire to have that be what's going on, because that is much easier, unfortunately, than also having to work through trauma and stress, mental health as a journey. I think there's a lot of shame surrounding mental health and stigma regarding treatment of mental health. I think that is very, very sad and completely unnecessary, because our brain is potentially, single-handedly the most important part of our body. It's running everything else. And I know a lot of other people are going to disagree with that. And I also, as a pelvic floor therapist, I'm like, our pelvis is the most important part of our body. But everything's run through our brain, and it is important to take care of it. And it is important to process through your life and what your brain is doing with all of the information it has received from the time you were born. And so I just really encourage people to not be afraid of that. And if you aren't ready to deal with it, that is A-okay. You do not want to rush into mental health therapy if you are not ready, because it will not be successful. And then you're going to feel like you failed yet another thing. And that also wasn't what was going on. So I don't want that to ever happen. If you're not ready, don't go. But if you feel like that's something that you need to process through and work through, there are a ton of lovely, well-trained mental health therapists of every variety that are, there's also tons of them that are trauma informed and do trauma-based treatment that can help you work through that. It's kind of a cohesive treatment. So, if you have a GI dysfunction and you're seeing me for the emptying issue that pelvic floor plays a role in, and you're seeing a GI doctor for, some biome issues in your small intestine with an alteration of your bacteria, I don't know. And then you're really trying to get better, but it's still not working. I think that there's a lovely third component of that we can throw in, which is mental health. And we can really start kind of diving through and figuring all of it out and seeing how we can improve the rest of your body, because it is so important.
Well, and I think you're right. And mental health has gotten such a bad label. And I think it's healthy to go talk to a professional who's trained. Just, you don't have to have a deep, dark, lifelong, awful trauma. You don't have to have, it's just, I have always found it helpful to have this objective person in my life to even go just run things by in life and talk about and go, okay, here's what I'm thinking about this. It doesn't have to be anything deep or bad or hard, but just maybe I have this decision and here's what I'm looking at, and just somebody to walk you through that who doesn't have, as they say, any skin in the game. There's nothing that they're going to gain or lose by advising you or talking you through one way or another. I don't know. I find it very helpful.
It's the most helpful thing that I think I maybe have ever done. It's just having somebody also, as you're saying, talking through your decision-making process. They'll pause and say, potentially, why do you think that way? Right? That's how I learned that I was a catastrophist. Like, if I make the wrong decision, the worst possible outcome will occur. And I didn't know that. And that was luckily a long time ago, and had to work through that. And I didn't even know that I did it. He was just, this was in college, and he was just like, well, why? What makes you think that would happen if you make that decision? I'm like, well, I don't know. It just would. And then hearing that myself say that, and then be like, wow, I actually don't know. Let's talk about that and let's figure that out, and allow me then some freedom in my decision-making process.
Yeah.
Right? It's so helpful of just processing some of the things that you say and making you think for a second time, why do I think that? Because you maybe never had to process that before.
Okay, that's a really good point. And I think we live in such a busy, distracted world now.
Yep.
And again, this is along the lines of, it doesn't have to be some big old mean, haunting, ugly trauma. There could be a pattern in your brain and in your life that you've just learned to respond with, and you just do it. And sometimes I feel like, because we're so distracted and we're so busy, we don't take a lot of time to think through, oh, wow, why do I think that way? And I think we hesitate asking people we know, hey, do you think if I make this decision, it's going to be a catastrophe? Because I do.
Right. Exactly.
And they'll go, what? I've never thought that.
Yeah.
And then you feel weird and stupid, like, wait, they're not thinking that way. And that's my really good friend. So maybe there's something wrong with me.
So now I'm crazy.
We've all gone through different experiences. We've all learned different ways, healthy or not, of dealing with, and we're all distracted, we're all busy, and we're all reactive.
Exactly.
I think, and everybody is there to a different degree, but I'm painting with a broad brush.
Yes.
Because it seems like that's what our culture has cultivated. Right? If you're not overly busy and looking stressed out, you're really not doing much in life.
Right. Then you're lazy.
And you're lazy. Yes. And I think that is such, I know I've been there. And I can stay there. And I'm trying really hard to not live in that anymore, because it's just, I don't know how we got here. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I think for the most part, we're there. And so I think people need to know it's okay and really healthy
Yes.
to take a step back and let's spend some time with ourselves, right?
Yep.
And see, hey, what frustrates me?
Right.
What seems problematic? Can I think of anything in my life that might have some deep-seated effect?
Yeah. And
we don't even have to call it trauma. Just say, is it something that's affected my life for a long time, or that, like, maybe I'm insecure in this situation and I feel overwhelmed by it. Well, why? Where did that come from?
Right. Absolutely. And that's another thing that's like talked about a lot in the book, is like how we learn to respond to situations. And then particularly in regards to trauma and traumatic experiences, overreacting and underreacting, as far as people who maybe in response to this increased stress and all of this stuff happening around them, who lash out, and start attacking things around them because that's their overreaction, or the people who freeze and underreact and don't know what else to do. And so they just sit, and stay still and don't do anything. Both of those things can happen, right? And again, we can put that in relation to a traumatic event, but those things can come from deep-seated things that you did as a kid. And either I felt helpless as in this moment, and so now I overreact to even little things, but maybe underreact to very traumatic experiences, and vice versa, right? I felt like I should have done something and I didn't. And now, but I also have this fear, and now I just don't do anything in response to these stressful situations, and I freeze. Those are both scenarios that happen, and neither one of those is super healthy. And so figuring out how do we deal with that? How do we identify that in ourselves, and then how do we address that? I think that's really important. So,
and one of the ways I know that and this took me a long time to learn, and I hope I'm better at it. I know I try really hard to live this way, but connecting with a core group of people that I trust, like developing community, and we can have community on lots of different levels. And I know there are a lot of ways on social media and other ways in our world that present as community, but they're really not. It's very surface. You really don't. And when I talk about community, it's who am I spending time with, serving with, doing life with, and who are those core people in my community really know me and who I let have a voice in my life because I know they love me.
Right.
I trust them. They're for my good, and I'm for theirs, and they're for me. But we have an understanding and relationship of, I need you to hold me accountable. I need you to speak truth and love in my life. And those people are really important to me, because I feel like we all have to have people we can trust and who we allow to have. That is really sacred space.
Yes, it 100% is. And that's a topic out of the book that I don't feel as well-versed to speak on, but there's a whole topic about interpersonal neurobiology, I'm quite certain is the term.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to read the book, yes.
And it talks so much about the importance of relationships and people who are safe relationships for us in our lives, and how that changes the neurobiology of our brain and how then we process through
I love that.
everything that happens in our lives. It's fascinating. Can't recommend it.
Because those are people too, as you're talking about, let's assess. So we're talking about, okay, look at our lives, assess maybe where we know there are some things that might still affect us, or maybe there aren't. Maybe it's just life in general right now. And then we have to assess that. We have to assess what the big T trauma, and I'm going to call it the small capital T trauma, and then the little t.
Yeah.
Because I think there's layers and different levels.
Yes, absolutely.
And then what kind of tools do we need to work through it? What do we need to understand? Who can we invite into that? Whether it's a mentor, trusted mentor, counselor, or friends, to say, hey, when I hear this, here's how I react. Would you think that I'm just assuming it's going to be a catastrophe? Is that what you hear?
Yes.
And do you feel that way about things? And they go, no, I feel, and then they'll say something. I'm like, oh, I don't do that.
Yeah. Right.
And we're all different. And so I think it's a really healthy balance to hear everybody else's. We all look at things through different lens of our culture, how we were raised, all of our background.
Yes.
And I don't know. I love this topic. I can't wait I have the book. I just haven't read it.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we close, tell me if somebody's listening and just kind of going, wow, that is so much great information. And I'm going to have to think about this and where stress and trauma and problems and frustrations might be impacting me physically or mentally or emotionally, and what I need to do.
Yeah.
What would be the one thing you want them to walk away with from our conversation? And by the way, thank you. This was so good. I'm going to go back and listen to this numerous times. So thank you.
Yes, of course. And thank you for having this conversation and allowing me to be here. So do you want to briefly mention one thing and then I want to answer your question if that's okay?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Which is also the thing that I deal with the most, which is muscle tension in people's bodies.
Thank you. Yes, we need to address that.
Yes. So that is yet another of the cascades of the chronic stress and fight or flight system in our body, is that also our muscles become more and more restricted and they become more and more active. So I always liken it to, imagine like if you put your hand into a fist and squeeze actively, not just like resting, but actually squeezing your hand into a fist and then just walk around like that for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Imagine then doing that for a day, 2 days, 2 years, 2 decades, and imagine how your hand would have changed over that period of time.
Wow.
So now your blood vessels are not getting they are shortened. Your fascia that surrounds your muscles is tight. The muscles themselves inside your palm and inside your fingers are super restricted. And then somebody told you 20 years later, well, just open your hand. What?
No kidding.
Physically impossible at that point, right? And so recognizing that can be yet another presentation. So as humans, some of the big places where we hold that are our jaw, our shoulders, our neck. And then huge part for me is really our pelvic floor and our hips. And that there's a bunch of research in some other areas about like emotional, like where exactly in our body we hold specific emotions. And anyway, it's super interesting, but that can happen over time as well. And so then whenever you think about other things like pain, start very simply with pain in our neck, in our shoulders, in our abdomen, in our pelvis, in our hips. Is some of that just from this long-term stress and trauma and not having known how to deal with it? And so our body is just constantly holding and activating because it's part of a protective mechanism. So part of fight or flight system, right, is that our body guards and protects. And again, that little fire alarm system, and the little part of that, that's the fastest part, the smoke detector part, that's your fastest little signal, turns on a bunch of muscles, again, subconsciously, that tells them to activate and know that you're doing it. But again, 10, 20, 30 years later, that's where you have stayed. Yes, so much. And then we wonder why we can't just let go, why that knot is still there, right? Why I, maybe have trouble. Some, ways people present to me is with bowel or bladder or sexual dysfunction, why they have difficulty emptying, why they, have constipation for a long time, why they have painful sex, why they just have pain in their pelvis all the time. Part of that can be from this long-term chronic holding pattern that can come from some deep trauma issues. Yeah. So I just want to say that that's one other big giant thing, again, that I deal with a lot of, that people need to be aware of. Yeah.
Thank you, because that is true. And I think ongoing, I'm telling myself this as I'm saying this, not necessarily that you can look at your life and go, well, I didn't have this kind of trauma, so therefore that can't be the answer. it doesn't have to be one big life event. It doesn't have to be, it could just be, as you've explained, with how our bodies react, even when we don't realize it, that over time, I love it because I have used the fist thing in workshops before, but had them tighten it for like 20 seconds and then let it go, to talk about when we're really anxious about something and then how great that feels when you let it go. I've never thought about holding that for a year and then what does that do? That gives me a whole new understanding of, when I've had tightness up in my shoulders or in my jaw, I have TMJ, and it's like, well, what's that about? And now I'm going, well, now, okay, I understand why it feels tight, like all the time.
Right. And I want to say, there is, that is a physical issue. And there are PTs and lots of people that work with our body that can treat that physical issue. And I don't want to make people think that this is just all in your brain, that it's, this is all mental and it has nothing to do with the rest of your body, because that is not true. There are physical cascades, though, that come from this, and you can't only fix one or the other. I can't fix your body by only treating you physically. And I can't only fix your body by only treating you mentally. We have to really take a comprehensive approach. And so to answer your question, that is the most important thing that I want people to take away from this conversation, is that this is comprehensive and it affects you from top down, right? From the brain all the way out of that. Your body is affected. And there are different levels where you can have intervention. I, as a physical therapist, can come in physically to the musculoskeletal system and say, okay, here you are, you're having constipation, let's say, you can't evacuate well. Let's check and see, what are your muscles doing? Are they doing what they need to do to allow you to go to the bathroom? No, they're not. Okay, well, we can work on this from a physiological, movement-based system, and I can treat that. And I think we also have a GI, who I talked about. They can treat you from a medical system intervention. And then we also need to go to where can we come from mental health as well. And it doesn't necessarily mean even going to a counselor or a therapist. It can just mean recognizing, am I in stress all the time? Am I ever letting myself breathe? Am I ever allowing myself a balance between my sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, between my fight and flight and rest and digest systems? Am I allowing that balance? Or am I staying very strongly in fight or flight? And if so, there are lots of things that you can do outside of therapy that you can work on. Something as simple as doing yoga. In the book, they talk a lot about some other types of movement therapies that you can do, doing a inhale and then a prolonged exhale. So that's why yoga, a lot of times people feel so much better whenever they're doing it. Not that it is hard on your body, but just teaching people how to breathe, because that changes. There's a nerve. Let me go a little physiological real quick, which is that you have a nerve that innervates your abdominal viscera, and that gets stretched and then released and moved with breathing. And by doing a longer exhale, it changes some pressures a little bit differently and can just change the way our nervous systems are activated. So yeah, it's super interesting. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, but I think the most important thing to know is that, first of all, don't be ashamed of anything that you feel, and take the time to step back and allow yourself to process that, and to just, and not even process, let's just say recognize. Just recognize how you feel all the time, rather than just avoiding it, because that's not going to help the problem. It's only going to propagate and make it worse. Oh, you'll just have to deal with it now in 10 years instead of tomorrow, but it's worse in 10 years. So go ahead and just take that second to recognize what's going on, and then just understand that you are more than a body system. You are a whole person who is a collection of body systems. In our medical system, we have a lot of specialists, and that's lovely because they know a lot about their system. That also means that sometimes you have to be the advocate for yourself to say, where else can I address this? Because what other parts of my body could be involved? And where else do I need to potentially have some intervention to help myself as a whole get better as a whole person? Because it's all
I love that reminder. We are whole people.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your summary to talk about, you don't have to go see a counselor or a therapist. There are things you can do. And I think I love what you said about it's comprehensive. We're whole people. Take a comprehensive approach. There are cascades of things that can happen. And I think like what kept coming to me the whole time you were saying that is we need to be aware and know ourselves and take time to figure out what's even going on. Even if we don't understand it, at least register, I have challenges with this and I've got this stress going on. Okay. And then advocate for yourself and see the appropriate people who can help you in all these different areas. And one of those people needs to be you, Kat. I thank you. Thank you for walking us through that. Wow, that is so good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me come on and talk about it. And I just really encourage people to read and learn more and talk to people and spread the word that we need to talk about this and to just destigmatize this discussion in general, because it's a hard one to have about yourself. But
yes,
we ourselves, all we can be responsible for is creating a safe space around us and welcoming people into that and just allowing that to be. And if that means people now feel safe enough to have that conversation with us, awesome. And if not, that's okay too. But we've done our part, which is create a safe and healthy space for those.
I like that. Yeah. Create a safe and healthy space for yourself, and then also offer that to others so that we can all be a little more open to hearing each other and supporting each other and being encouraging.
Being kinder to each other.
Being kinder. Yes, ma'am. Yes, well, thank you. I appreciate you so much. And y'all, thanks for listening today.
Yes, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to The Bearing Life. Go to my website, drjulieshannon.com, to subscribe to the podcast, as well as my newsletter where you'll get the new podcast episodes, any resources or blog posts that week. We keep it short and sweet and helpful. I hope this episode helps you know you are not alone. You're created for this place and time. Let's take a breath and take that next defining step.